Good evening, everybody. Good to be here. And just before we start, I'm going to read the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this virtual meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Members are reminded of the need to unmute their microphones before speaking. Item number 2 is apologies for absence. Jackie.
No apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. And that means no substitute members. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? No, none that I can see. Minutes of the last meeting, which was on the 8th of December, feels like a long time ago now. Does anyone have any comments with the minutes, or is everyone happy to agree them?
Agreed.
Brilliant. And then on to the primary item of the agenda, which is the council house building update. And before we start, I'd like to introduce everyone to Rochelle, who is new to the team and has been doing great work so far. Deborah, will you be giving the update, or is it Rochelle?
So Rochelle will be giving the update this evening.
Oh, brilliant. So I'll hand you over to Rochelle. Thank you.
Hi all. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through the executive summary. So the report is focusing on progress made across phases 3 to 5 of the programme, ones that are either completed on site or currently being procured. Phase 4, 4.1 delivers or will deliver 16 units. It is contracted and all starts on sites are underway. Millfield was the last one to be started in November 20. Pitkill has been added to 4.1, which I believe was reported on in the last meeting, and start on site is due this month. Phase 4.2 of 22 units has also been contracted and starts on site have been achieved in January 21. 4.3, 15 units, consent approval received for Woolard Street in February 21. That was for 8 units. Contract signing and possession, we're still aiming to achieve this month with the start on site anticipated for July or August. 4.4, 28 units, those are awaiting consent. We've got Ladyfields and Checkers Road B, which are still within planning. Work's being undertaken to discuss how these can be progressed as quickly as possible, and it's really just effects of the SAC issue. We're anticipating, we've had a request for extension of time, so hoping that all schemes within planning that have been stuck will be reached a determination date by May 21. And then the tender process will follow on from there. And we have, I think it was mentioned last time, also a consideration may be needed for an interim committee approval, just because we may miss the next one and we might need some approvals in between then. And yeah, that's about it so far.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rochelle. And just to note, I was really pleased to see Cyril Hawkins Close completed recently and new tenants move in. They look really lovely and all kind of family homes in North Weald. I can see Deborah's got her hand up.
As Councillor, I'd just like to inform you that we do plan to have a grand street party to celebrate the opening of the road. Unfortunately, COVID has delayed us, as you know. But we're very excited, and that's in the diary for July.
Thank you, Deborah. And I got the opportunity last month to meet with Shirley Hawkins, who was Cyril's wife and who many members will know at a social distance, have a look at the completed properties. And so that was a really good thing to do. On the report, do any members of the committee have questions? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. Just reading through and looking at all the financial side of things, I was wondering, have we ever had a council house building project that's actually come in under budget?
So far, of what I've seen so far, I'm not sure that there has been. I'm not aware of all of the previous phases, so phases 1 to 3. I know that Cyril Hawkins was over budget, and there were specific reasons due to contamination, COVID, and other issues that came up. We do have the luxury of now having ProVal, which is a feasibility tool which we will be using to run all schemes before we even decide to take them forward as a development project, and that will give us some better control over our finances.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, not for tonight, but if we could get a report of all we've done so far with predicted and what would it turned out to be, because if, as I think from my memory, almost every one of them ends up being over budget, that probably means that we're not setting our budget correctly. I do understand we try and be aggressive, but let's try and get a realistic view rather than one that's always going over.
Yeah, ProVal will definitely give us a better insight to that, but I'll get those together.
Thank you. And officers will correct me if I'm wrong, but I know the historic sites we were using, particularly the garage sites, did lead to some issues with delays for various contamination reasons. And hopefully, as we kind of move into the later phases, we'll be looking at slightly different sites. I know there are some garage sites within that the next few phases, but hopefully that will lead to less delays also. But I'm glad that the feasibility studies are going to be undertaken moving forward. I think that's a really positive step. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a question that I've asked on a few occasions. I just wanted to be clear. Obviously, we started work now in the we'll discharge the planning conditions on the sites in Buckhurst Still, but not just the Buckhurst Still, but across all of the garage sites that we've identified in terms of the displacement for those owners of the garages. I know when we've discussed this previously, there was an effort made to try and house them as close to those sites as possible. But the question is really what next? Because after we've gone through this round of council house building, which is great, it's great, much needed houses for local residents, and you know we're really stealing the march on other local district councils around us. But what next? What are we going to be doing next? Because essentially, you know, there are so many garage sites that we've got and brownfield sites that we've identified. But how are we going to continue this program rolling?
Deb, do you want me to?
Rochelle, yeah.
Councillor Whitbread and Rochelle, would you like to? Would you mind if Rochelle takes us through the plan for phase 5, which I think will answer Councillor Patel's question?
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
No worries. Bear with me. Okay, so in phase 5, we're looking at 14 sites in total for various development opportunities. So in the list, we've got within Waltham Abbey, we've got Beachfield, Loughton, Burnley Close, Castell Road, Oakley Court, Hills Lane A and B, Barrington Close, and then in Nazing we've got Hydemead and Pound Close. In Epping we've got Western Drive. Ongar, we've got Fairfield Road and St Peter's Estate. In Buckhurst Hill, we've got Hornbeam Close, and again, Winters Way Estate within Waltham Abbey. I think to answer your question, we're identifying sites that have a potential for development. Each site will be looked at with a feasibility study, which we'll use ProVal for. And we'll be visiting sites, we'll be using our consultants to give us scope on what is possible there. So, for example, what can we build on there? What could be achieved? Obviously, where we do have garage sites, like you said, obviously, if there's they're rented and they're being used, we have to look at all of that kind of stuff. Where we're considering regeneration, we have to consider decanting. So there's a lot that goes in the back end of looking things up before we even consider taking them to next stages. So it's a case of looking at what opportunities get brought to us, or identifying those opportunities for ourselves.
We also have a number of commercial assets that we're looking at, which belong to the general fund. And Rochelle and her team are working on those, including a number of pubs. So that sort of adds to our list, and we've got a number of potential opportunities which are not on the table yet, but could be in the future, and will give us larger scale opportunities to build.
Thank you, Deborah. So I think the answer to that is that we're looking for new opportunities and making sure that they're as feasible as possible moving forward, making sure they're value for money and delivered in an effective way. But I think also the answer to your question, Councillor Patel, is that we want to continue with the council house building programme because it's a great success, and we want to continue delivering affordable housing for local people. Did you want to come back, Councillor Patel?
Yes, I did, Chair. Thank you. No, I just wanted to double check and to make sure really that when we are doing these feasibility studies on the commercial assets, for example, that we are managing everything in house. So it's our team that is appraising each of these sites and working out development potential rather than us having to go out to a third party to do it. Because we should have the skill set within our own staffing teams to be able to realise what is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck.
I can confirm that that's what's happening. They're being done within my team. The team have had training on how to use the system, and I've worked with Proval and other feasibility tools for a long time, so more than familiar with how to operate them.
Thank you, Rochelle. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to go to 4.1. We're talking around Queensway in Ongar. Page 24. I'm a bit concerned, picking up on Councillor Phillips' point, if we look at reports and investigations, we've not got anything flagged up for contamination of the ground in red. Yet on the other side, on the forthcoming actions, we've got the potential asbestos under slab. And then if we compare that to North Weald, where North Weald ran approximately £400,000 over budget because of the asbestos contamination, the contingency in the Queensway budget is 28,000. So I'm just picking up on the point that, as Councillor Phillips mentioned, we don't seem to be making enough allowances in the pre-budget planning.
Rochelle.
Hi, Councillor Bedford. If I'm honest, there from what I've looked at, there are some contingencies that could have definitely been done with being buffed up in order to allow for these things. Part of the problem is sometimes we get surveys done. Those are always done ahead of us going onto site, and sometimes things are not picked up, and it doesn't happen until you start digging, and that's when you uncover things. So that is what the contingency should cover, and that's why we now have Proval, so that we can make sure going forward that on further phases we're not missing the potential of using up all of our contingency and being in a situation where we're over budget. It's one of my top priorities to make sure that we stay in budget.
Thank you, Rochelle. Councillor Bedford. You're on mute, Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the thing clicked on. Yeah, no, I fully take that on board. However, when we look at North Weald and we were looking at that particular development and the number of units being built there, it's around, I think it's 12. So it's 10 3 beds and 2 houses. This Queensway development is probably a third of that. And when you look at that overspend on North Weald, £400,000 because of the I think a lot of it was contamination that was found after development. Surely, if we took that as a benchmark figure, then we should be allowing at least £100,000 for contamination removal at Ongar. If it doesn't happen, we've saved the money. But if it does happen, it's not going to cost us £28,000 to get rid of it. If it's under the slab, it's all got to be dug up in a controlled way and removed carefully, exactly the same as North Weald. So I think we need to realise, if we use North Weald going forward as a benchmark of what contingency should be per unit that we're building, that would be a good landmark going forward. I don't know if Councillor Phillip wants to add anything to that, so that his figures tie up a little bit nicer. Thank you.
My figures tie up very nicely, Councillor Bedford. I take the point. I'm not sure that the same contingency is necessarily applicable to all developments, and that's why I'm encouraged to hear what Rochelle was saying about the new system. If we have some degree of historical measuring, then we can actually, as we go forward, using the new system, we can actually track it going forward, and that will allow us to show improvement, which is what we're trying to do with a whole number of things around the finances. not get there in one bound, but take steps to make the overall thing improve as we go along.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. Rochelle, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just really to say that we are running as a part of the exercise. We're not putting in just schemes that we're looking at going forward. So we are putting into Proval phases 1, which contingencies already have been worked out, but we are putting them in so that we can use them to influence our decisions going forward.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Murray, who's not on the committee, but Councillor Patel's already had a few questions. So, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few issues that I didn't necessarily think I was going to raise tonight. It was merely more of a sitting process for me tonight and listening. But Councillor Phillip wanted an example of a housing budget that came in under budget. He will have to go back a few years, but it was a project I was fully aware of because I was in Holly's position at the time. That was the Limes Farm Improvement Scheme, which was a multi-million-pound project, and we came in under budget. So I was pleased about that. So that's your example if you want to use it. Another point, because the opening plans for the Seal Hawkins was mentioned, it may be water under the bridge, and I accept if that's the feeling. And I haven't been approached by the family, but as you know, I was a ward councillor with Joan Davis for many years. Do we kind of think that that's gone under the water under the bridge now, an official opening at Joan Davis' house? I know we had it planned, then it was planned again, and it's all been stopped by COVID. And if the general view is that that's water under the bridge now, I'm sure that if I did speak to the family, they would still be quite keen for something to happen. So I think I would push for that. But if the consensus is that, you know, that's been and gone and COVID has kind of bypassed that, I would accept that. Can I just say that on phase 5, and I do know my Loughton roads quite well, I don't recognise Burnley Close. There's Burnley Drive, so just have a look at that, because I don't recognise Burnley Close as being existing, unless it's a way of describing a banjo turning that doesn't actually have a name. But most banjo turnings on the estate do have separate names. So I think you'll find that that's Burnley Drive, not Burnley Close. Can I thank whoever, and I don't know whether that's you, Holly, or the officers, or both of you, as regards the speedy action on Molescroft Green. That did make sense. And I think it's a good example of where my final point is relevant. If there's some, I was going to say blue sky thinking, but I really don't like that phrase. I just can't think of another one. If there's a kind of off the wall thought about possible sites, I do think it is worth talking to ward members right at the very beginning, before it even appears on an agenda, because they might have hinterland and local knowledge. So, for example, we would have been able to tell you straight away about Molescroft Green and the fairly recent issues around it. It's not really particularly historic. So I do think that if there are sites that haven't appeared on agendas yet, before they ever appear on a public agenda, it's a really good idea to talk to ward members. I'm not saying you do what they say, and I'm not saying the ward members should have a veto. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. But most of them do have considerable local knowledge, and they might be able to say to the development officers involved, well, are you aware of this? Are you aware that this happened 10 years ago? Are you aware of this history of the site? And I just think we should, that would be useful for all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. And on the Limes Farm project, actually my first job as a cabinet member 2 years ago was driving around all of our different estates, and actually I was told about that in quite a lot of detail, the Limes Farm project. And I know we're doing some new work on Limes Farm to enhance the estate now, which is good news. On Burton Road, actually I would quite like to see the development marked. I think it's a really good development, and it's important to mark that. So hopefully post Purda we'll be able to mark that in some way, probably more modest due to kind of social distancing, but we will try and mark that in some way. On Burnley Drive, I'll let officers comment on that, so I'll go on to Rochelle. And on Marscroft Way, thank you for flagging that in the last meeting, and I know officers responded quickly and we had some conversations around that. And I think this kind of community engagement approach that we're now adopting, and just that consultation is key. So I'm just going to pass to Rochelle on the Burnley Drive point.
Just to say, Councillor Murray, I think you are right. It should be Drive, so that's a typo. So apologies for that. Milescroft Way, yes, I did look at that and acknowledged that I agreed. I thought that was best to leave that one alone. And just to point out as well that I am having discussions around doing webinars with councillors, so that we can discuss schemes ahead of me even, get your thoughts, tell me what's working in the area, what's not working, and we can take those forward, or not take them forward if we don't think it's a good idea. So that will be coming soon. We will have some webinars on that.
Thanks, Rochelle. Councillor Wixley.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't seem to be able to operate the yellow hand signal. I was all right on the blue signal, but I can't see anything to make the yellow one work. So I've used my actual hand, if that's all right. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I was a bit curious about this reference to Burnley Close, because Burnley Drive is in my ward, but at least half of it is, because it's a border between Fairmead Ward and Broadway Ward. And I can't envisage a site there at all. I'd be very interested to know where that is, because I can't think of one. That was one point. The second point, which is actually in Roding Ward, which is not a ward I represent as a district council, but it is as a town council. And I don't know if Stephen Murray has noticed, but I'm referring to the Kirby Close development, which is underway, I believe. There's some work going on there. At the back of the site, there's a service road which runs parallel to Valley Hill. It's behind a block of flats. And there's a green verge there, and it's absolutely been decimated, and to such an extent, because of the heavy wheel marks, I assume that it's by some of the vehicles which are working on the Kirby Close site. I may be wrong, but that's my guess. But if that is the case, or even if it isn't, I just ask that that verge be restored. But it's absolutely been decimated when I walked along there a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. I'm not sure if Rochelle wants to comment on that, but I'm sure that's something we can look into. Rochelle?
Thank you. Just to comment on Kirby Close, there are a number of verges that have actually been covered over whilst the building work is carrying on, and it's just for access, so for vehicles turning points, but the verges will be put back, ones that have been covered over. And I will double check around the service road and speak to the site team.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley.
This particular verge, it would only be used for parking vehicles on, because it's actually on a slope. So, I can envisage a vehicle being half on the road and half on this slope verge, but it looked absolutely awful a couple of weeks ago.
I'll take a look into that for you.
Brilliant. Councillor Heap.
Thank you. Yes, just a couple of points. Phase 5, no surprise, it's Hornbeam Close again, or Hornbeam Close. And the garage is there. And I've bored Rochelle already with an email saying about the population density of Buxton East, which is 4,039, so it's really quite tightly packed. And to remove these garages would have an enormous impact, because I know there are at least 11 garages with cars in, and they've all got to go somewhere. And a lot of them are in Cascade Close, which is the thing that's right next to it. And it would be an enormously detrimental impact to the area and all the people who live in it. So I would really urge that we don't go down that path. And there's a big drainage issue there as well. Huge drainage issue at the moment, which is often being treated. And the other thing I would like to ask is the development in Pick Hill. There's been a huge amount of destruction in Pick Hill just recently, and I've been sent some horrendous photographs of trees being chopped down. Is that part of this development, or is that a private developer just clearing some land in the hope that he's going to get permission? That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Heap. Rochelle, did you want to comment on them points?
Yeah, so just on Hornbeam Close, we are still just at the really early stages of looking to see what would even work there, if anything is possible. And as we discussed, I'm going to come back to you and go through those proposals so that we can have a discussion about it. And if take next steps, if we think yes, let's go for it, or not, then we'll review that. Pick Hill, I'm not sure about that one, but I will find out and I'll come back to you to check if it is part of our development.
Thank you.
Thank you. And back to Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the point that Councillor Murray made, and actually Simon Heath, Councillor Heath gave a good example of it right then. Obviously, liaison with ward members is really important, but I think obviously it must be borne in mind that some schemes that have been brought forward in the past have been quite controversial, and obviously as ward members, when these schemes do come forward, obviously balancing on the viewpoints of local residents is obviously paramount. However, where we've run through the planning, gone through the planning process, etc., and these schemes have come forward, that's obviously a separate. That's a separate process in itself, and so I think it's a balancing act between the two. So just something to be mindful of, because the schemes that the Bucket Steel schemes, although they were contentious, had the ward members' views been taken on board, those schemes may not have been where they are now, and so it is a balancing act. It is really important that we provide council houses for local residents, because it's always well publicised how many of our local residents can't afford to buy properties within our district, and it is a balancing act, and we do have to sympathise with local residents, particularly also the garage owners themselves as well, because of the displacement of having to relocate them. But it is a delicate balancing act, as I've said. Just picking up on the points that were made by Councillor Bedford and Councillor Phillips around the budget, and around making sure that these schemes do come in on budget. I want to draw back to the very first phase, the one that was delayed. I believe it was the Waltham Abbey site, and the reasons why that was delayed. And I know this was before Deborah Fenton's time with the council, but there were obviously some learns to be made from that development, and the primary one was obviously that the contractor didn't estimate the cost of having to put in the relevant foundations because of the land contamination. It's a constant issue that comes up, that land contamination, particularly with these garage sites. They are garage sites after all, so they are going to be contaminated in one way, shape or form. So we do really need to consider that as we do move forward, and also as well around the type of foundations that need to be applied, subject to where these sites are located, whether it be pile raft or other. Essentially, that's the cost of that is borne by the contractor, because if they carry out their due diligence, for example, they need to take these things on board. So in terms of budget setting, I completely agree that, and we're honing in on the point around land contamination. Well, we know it's an issue because they are garage sites, so greater contingency does need to be made around that. But in terms of the foundation costs, that is actually at the cost of the contractor, because this is part of their due diligence, as mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor Patel, and comments noted there. And obviously, where sites are controversial and there are issues, I think the new approach is actually looking to find the best way forward. And sometimes there can be kind of compromises found and balance found to find the best possible way forward for both existing residents and new residents in new council homes too. And then in terms of the garage site, I think that's a point that's been well made tonight, and it's something that we are very conscious of, and that is why ideally we will move away from garage sites. Obviously there's some historic garage sites still within the council house planning, but I think that's a point well made, and thank you also for them technical points too. Deborah, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to emphasise actually what you've just pointed out, that our scheme going forward, our phase 5 scheme, is not just about building, it's about creating great places where people want to live. And we are partnering, so Rochelle and her team are partnering with the asset team, with Rachel Smith, the land team, with Safer Communities and with Communities and Wellbeing to create a place approach. So, for example, Hornbeams was mentioned. Well, our aspiration for Hornbeams is not actually just to build, but is to alleviate the parking stress by creating more parking spaces. So, you know, where we can do that and where we can improve the area, we certainly will be doing that, and we'll be doing a higher level of due diligence in terms of the demographics, in terms of the environmental, looking at what we can do in terms of climate and, you know, the passive house. So I think it was just to emphasise, Councillor Whitbread, what you said about, you know, place.
Thank you, Deborah. I think that was a point really well put. And also the importance of delivering a modern council house scheme as well. So making sure the homes that we're delivering are really set for the future. Councillor Patel, I'll let you come in one more time quickly.
Absolute final point. I think, you know, so in agreement with the points that Councillor Heap has made about that Hornby Close site. Obviously, the other site, garage sites in close vicinity, went through and were approved by committee and then by planning. We do really need to look at those sites, and I am warned to hear Rochelle's comments that she made earlier around that site, and your comments as well, Deborah, around looking at different options, because it is a very dense part of the district, dense part of that ward. There is a lot of parking stress in that particular area, and I think obviously those conversations, I'm glad that, you know, points being made, and these points are being considered at a very early stage. It'd be really interesting to see whether a scheme can come forward, and if that scheme does come forward, what it's going to look like in practice.
Thank you. Rochelle, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just quickly, just sort of adding to what Deborah said, obviously, as well as looking at doing higher levels of due diligence, I'm wanting to look at the landscaping that we can bring to the areas, the play area. So I noticed in particular at Hornby Close, where we do have those sites already, there's a play area that is empty. So I've asked the question to find out who's in ownership of it. Can we do something there? Because I'm not wanting to just come to different sites and put new builds there and not have regard for the residents that are already currently there. So they're as much a part of the community as any new residents that come to the area. So we're looking at it on a much bigger scale. We are considering the parking stress, and where we are going in looking at new developments, we are looking to see how we can alleviate any of that. And we're using surveys to be able to look at the parking issues before we do anything, so that we can see where we need to include that within our developments or wider afield.
Excellent. Councillor Murray, did you want to come back in?
Just very quickly, because of that word play area, if we're talking about general space for children to play, fine, but I think we need to realise that in this district, playgrounds are the responsibility of parish councils, and you're going to set a really difficult ball rolling if we start providing some playgrounds and other parishes. For example, I feel strongly about that because Loughton's having to find about another £100,000 upgrading a playground, and I'm sure there's other issues in other towns. So I think we need to take a general understanding that the provision of playgrounds as a playground, not play space, but playgrounds, are really the province of parish councils.
Thank you, Councillor Murray, for that point. And Councillor Heap, do you want to come in again?
Yes, sort of preempted by Councillor Murray there. Would it be possible, when we have these discussions about particularly Hornby Close, but there are a lot of parish councillors who live nearby who have a much more knowledge than even I do, would it be possible to include them?
Thank you, Councillor Heap. And I know that Rochelle is engaging more widely, and And I certainly know that some parish councillors have been consulted on schemes of late, but I'll let Rochelle come in and comment on that further.
Yeah, we will do that. I see no reason why they can't be included. And on the point of playgrounds, it's as much as I'm saying looking at those, we're looking at options, so possibly we could, as a part of the development, work with the parish council to make a contribution towards that play area. So we will do it in the right way.
Thank you. And Councillor Wixley?
Yeah, I'm just showing off because I've found the yellow hand actually, but what I was going to say is that playgrounds can be a bit sensitive. I think Councillor Murray will remember the playground that used to be on the Hanbury estate, which was developed about, I don't know, 30 years ago now, 25 years ago. That was a private development, but the playground seemed to upset the residents, and it was actually taken away in the end. So it can be a sort of sensitive issue. But I just thought I'd mention that. But I think it's perhaps worth consulting the relevant town or parish council if you're thinking of installing a playground.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. I think that's a good point, and we all know the value of playgrounds and the controversy that sometimes surrounds them in terms of making sure they have the right funding in our own wards and areas. Rochelle, did you want to comment on that further?
Yeah, just to say that I think this is the importance of us having the meetings with the parish councils, the wardens, just so that we can get a real understanding of a grasp of each area, what they'd like to see, what residents would like to see, and taking that forward, because it may not be that a play area is what they need. They might want a landscape garden, but we can consider all of that in those meetings.
Thanks, Rochelle. And is there any further points from members this evening? No? So are we happy to agree or note the Council House report phases 3 to 5?
Noted.
Thank you. And then on to any other business. Is there any other business, Jackie?
No other business, Chairman.
Brilliant. And then exclusion of the public and press. We've got no public or press, I believe. So that's the close of the meeting. And thank you